I've seen guys that are just, they work hard, don't get me wrong, but they're, they're newbies and all that, and they're throwing in stuff and they're not supporting the loads and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, you got a giant crack in your ceiling because it wasn't supported right. That's the risk you're going to take by
Hmm.
not bringing in professionals or not doing a permits. They're not going to say no, the city, to let you do that. They're just going to make you do it right. So yes, it's going to cost a little bit more money, and that's what most of these people that don't do permits is all about. It's the money.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with John from Blackjack Contracting. Hey, John, how's it going?
Great, buddy. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to today's subject matter, permits, because this is one of those things that, at least I'll anecdotally speak about my experiences. A lot of new investors I find are one of two things. Either they want all the permits all the time, or they're like, "Ooh, I'm going to try and sneak through and not do this." And, I'd love to just explore with you, what requires permits, what doesn't, and how should investors kind of factor this in when they're planning their renovations, right? Because, I'm assuming the projects with permits, they might take a little bit longer. There might be a little bit more work involved, but there's also consequences these days if you're not getting permits, especially if you're looking at selling the property or sometimes even refinancing the property. So when thinking about permits, where should we start?
So it's one of those things that first of all starts with a comfort level. Usually it's seasoned people versus newbies, and it goes away and they start caring a little bit less. Now, the best ones, the best customers, the most successful customers use permits 100% of the time, but it's just not worth the risk. Um, so, I mean, our main market here in Hamilton, and what's going to happen is, say people want to add a basement, but they don't want to go through the permitting process. And I'm going to use my friend as an example because he won't mind. Good landscaper buddy of mine did a bunch of work. He calls me. He's like, I'm having a little problem at one of my properties. We took out the permits, but I never got any inspections done. Why? Well, I just didn't want to wait. Okay, so then end up costing them $20,000 for us to go back and retrofit it all and get the inspections, all that stuff done. And then we got I saw a beautiful property in Stony Creek that had a gorgeous basement suite, and it was built extremely well. I went and inspected it, but the guy didn't take out the permits. Then all of a sudden, an order came on the property because some neighbor saw it, right? And it was
Mm-hmm.
a neighborhood that just got into allowing this stuff, and now they had 30 days to rush through a variance process, a permit process, or they're going to lose their tenants and have to retrofit their house back to single family. So, I mean, permits and drawings for a conversion, just for example, are going to run you probably between $5,000 and $7,000, but now it's going to end up costing them probably 50,000, something like that, because I just skipped a step. The basic answer when you need permits: if you are changing the use of the property, if you are moving structure, if you are doing major HVAC, if you are doing major plumbing, example, you're not switching out a fixture for a fixture, you're literally moving it, changing drains, water lines. Electrical is 100% of the time, every single time, except for, you just want to change your plug from the old ones to the new ones, or you're just going to change a light fixture. It's, I've been in this electrical career for a long time, and the Electrical Safety Authority, which is the Ontario governing body, it's the only private organization in Canada that has the full power of law. They're actually really good people to work with as long as you don't mess with them. For example, to do a duplex conversion, the wiring permit is about $150.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so inconsequential. If, for example, you wired things yourself and you did not get out a permit and the house burns down, they're going to do an audit and all the wires have dates on them. And all of a sudden they can be denied insurance. So for $150, is it worth it? No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
The way electrical works is that any homeowner has the right to work in your home, on wiring on your home, but you have to take out a permit. But you are not allowed to hire Joe Blow to do it for you. The way the electrical works is you have to hire a licensed electrical contractor, not just a licensed electrician, not a master electrician, a licensed electrical contractor. So I have 3 licenses. I have all 3, so I can legally go do wiring in your home. But as a master, you can't hire me directly. You have to hire a company. You can't exchange money. So, all of a sudden if I go, you want me to come over
Mhm.
for a case of beer and you take out the permit yourself, they're not gonna, but they work a lot hard to weed out the unlicensed contractors because wiring is one that you don't want to mess with. So anytime you're doing electrical, require a permit. What people often want to skip the electrical permit for is because they don't want the city to know about it, aka they're finishing a basement, to
Mhm.
add extra space to your student rental, your burr, and they're afraid that if you bring the electrical inspector in, that they're going to tell the city and you're going to get taxes raised. The Electrical Safety Authority does not care. They do not communicate with the cities about what projects you're doing unless they see something like so dangerous that your house is going to die. So that's something
Mhm.
you do not need to be afraid to get an electrical permit. They will not rat you out to the city about anything. As long as the wiring's done safe, you're good.
Mhm.
Now, for example, is that so you want to do a burr project and you're just going like for like, you're putting new floors down, you're replacing existing cabinets, the kitchen staying where it is, the bathroom staying exactly how it is, you're just replacing fixtures, you're not moving walls, you're not changing HVAC, you don't need a permit. That's just a renovation. You're going to do a major burr project where you're putting in beams, you're
Mhm.
rerouting plumbing, you're changing the insulation value. Yes, you require a permit. Permits like that are not very difficult to obtain because all you're doing is internal changes, right? You don't need to worry about getting denied or how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost you less than $1,000 for all that. It's just you're working on a single family. The only thing about it is, yes, it adds time because you have to take to the permitting process. But if you do it right and you plan it
Mhm.
before the project, you'll have the permit before you start. And when it comes to the quality of work, obviously they're going to make you bring it up to code, so there's going to be
Mhm.
cost involved, but you're going to be end up with a project when you go to sell that house or thing, you have all the documentation, it's going to be worth more, no questions. The big pain in the butt ones is when we get into conversions and rezoning and all that, going from 1 family to 2 or 2 to 3, because now all the zoning rules come into effect, and that's where
Mhm.
people sometimes don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I have some customers, no matter what, they'll go through it. And then you got some customers that make complete strategies of doing a legal duplex and then adding an illegal third. They take the risk on that. We sign off on it and say, I'm gonna build it right, but the city part is on your end. And some people make a great strategy out of it, and that's on them. But all of a sudden, the city shows up during that project, and that's like
Mhm.
you can't avoid the trucks and you can't avoid the materials. That becomes the risk that you just wasted a bunch of money and they're going to be watching that property, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's the basic answer on when and where you need a permit. Yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate you just breaking that down and sharing for us. And I guess maybe when we're also talking about permits, it's probably worth exploring at least a little bit, the consequences of when you choose to work with a contractor that's comfortable not getting permits, or like, especially when we're talking about some of those structural use changes, things of that
Yep.
nature. I'm imagining that some of those contractors maybe are also going to be less reputable. They're going to maybe, be more likely to flake on us, things of that nature. So just anything you want to riff on that subject matter?
Yeah, it's a tough one, I guess. But they have to be, if you're doing a job without a permit, the contractor has to do the same quality of work that you would do if you didn't have a permit. And that's where it becomes iffy, right? Are they going to go through all the effort of putting in the proper footings so they could support the load for that load bearing beam that's holding up your 3-floor house? So, I mean, if you are doing jobs without a permit, the contractor you work for is very important when it comes to major things. Obviously, changing floors or replacing
Yeah.
cabinets is not something you need to stress out about. But if you're
Hmm.
getting into, I'm always going to preach about electrical. Sorry, it's my nature. But but if they're saying, "Oh, we don't need a wiring permit," that's a bad sign.
Hmm.
Okay, that means they're not bringing in a licensed electrician. You do not let people that are not licensed electricians in your home unless it's some guy that you completely and utterly trust. It's just it can cost you so much and it's so dangerous.
Hmm.
my friend's got a feat saying, you know, if you do your own plumbing and it leaks, you get your feet wet. You know, if you set the wiring on, you're gonna burn your house down. And it's true. I just left
Mm-hmm.
a house this morning that had caught fire from an electrical fire type thing, and it's just something you don't want to mess
Mm.
with.
Yeah.
Plumbing is one too. Even though I'm not saying you're going to die from it. It's just everybody knows how much water damage can cause and how expensive it
Yeah.
can be, right? So do you really want half-ass plumbers on your job site, no matter
Mm-hmm.
how cheap you're trying to do this? But places, it's just the professional trades. I'm going to preach behind it because I believe in it, but just like that is not somewhere you want to cheap out. I'm not saying you want to pay top dollar. I'm just saying you want professionals doing
Yeah.
those things, because someone to board your house obviously is going to be less, you're going to be less worried about it than those professional trades. But you know, so
Mm-hmm.
but again, leads into, okay, you want to put in a big open span beam. I mean, we guys know how to do it. I got the best framer I can imagine on my team, so I'm not worried about it. But you know, I've seen guys that are just, you know, they work hard, don't get me wrong, but they're, you know, they're newbies and all that, and they're throwing in stuff and they're not supporting the loads and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, you got a giant crack in your ceiling because it wasn't supported right. That's the risk you're going to take by
Mm-hmm.
not bringing in professionals or not doing a permits. They're not going to say no, the city, to let you do that. They're just going to make you do it right. So yes, it's going to cost a little bit more money, and that's what most of these people that don't do permits is all about. It's the money, maybe a little bit of time, but it's the money. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, okay, so what I'll see a lot is a lot of flippers do it. Back in the heyday of flippers in Hamilton,
Right.
is they'll open the walls up, they'll close it up, and by the time the city ever knows, they're gone, right? They have no
Yeah.
responsibilities. All of a sudden, the cracking starts, and then no one's on the hook but the guy who bought it, and they did nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something you want to be careful of. If fresh flips is, and you see open walls, I'd either ask for the permits or get that bad boy inspected, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. And so for anyone that's brand new to this concept, what does that look like if I'm looking at buying a newly renovated property? Am I just reaching out to the city and getting them to pull the permits? What's that look like?
Yeah, so if you're in the middle of buying it, I would need to request them from the sellers, because that'll be an easy one, because any seller that took the permits are going to be proud to hand over the permits,
Mm-hmm.
because they're expecting more money in
Yeah.
return. You can, and you definitely can call the city. And if you can't get an answer from either of them, don't buy that house without an inspection. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Flippers make things, most of them, I've seen some great flippers, by the way, so I'm not downing flippers, but I'm saying is most flippers are, they want to get in and out as fast as possible, make it pretty, get out. So a lot of times wiring gets skipped. There's nothing worse in my eyes to see a brand new house that still has ungrounded wiring in it, because that was $5,000 they didn't want to spend, right?
Yeah.
Same with the beams. If you see an open concept and it looks brand new open concept, you want to get that beam checked out. And it's what most people don't realize, it's not the beam, it's the supports of the beam
Yeah.
that's going to cause all the problems, right? And that's going to be hard to see. So you're going to want to get that professionally checked if you can't find the permits, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really appreciate you sharing that. I guess before we wrap up this video, anything else when it comes to permits that you want to just kind of enlighten the audience on?
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a giant fans of cities or governments, don't get me wrong, but like the stress, okay, I'll be completely honest. My entire house is renovated top to bottom with a giant ass beam and brand new wiring, and there's not one permit for it, but I did it myself. If I screw up, I have to deal with the consequences, right? But just the comfort level of getting the permits for a lower, just for a minor cost, and you know that when you're done, there's no chance someone's going to show up. There's no chance you're going to have kick your tenants out because you didn't take the permits. It's just like the, sense of comfort is worth something to most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, I'm not worried about it. But if you're hiring a contractor, especially, it's just, at least you know the inspector's going to make sure they did it right, or at least the
Mm-hmm.
major points, right? Um, I mean, it gets a little detailed from there, but I mean, the guilt factor of having something happen in your house and someone getting
Mm-hmm.
hurt, is it worth it? No, I personally
Yeah.
don't believe it is. If you're doing the job yourself, you're comfortable with it. I mean, sometimes if you want to do a bunch of work yourself, just bring in an expert for the appropriate things, load bearing beams, trades, that kind of stuff. And oh well, you screwed up the mud. It's not going to hurt you,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can fix it, but it's the stuff. And one last thing, it's a little bit off topic, just like don't underestimate the stuff behind your walls. That's going to
Yeah.
cost you all the problems, and it's going to cost you all the money.
Hmm.
And it is 500 times cheaper to do it while everything's in the renovation than it is when your house is
Yeah.
pristine, and then you got to cut open your brand new stuff because you skipped a step. And
Yeah.
that's, you know,
There's
that's
nothing worse than trying to like fish lines or do things on a finished wall, and you're trying to like, you're like, oh, I just wanted to try and like get this done, rather than, yeah,
yeah,
and it ends up costing so much more to end up redoing that work, often in time and money. So really appreciate you sharing that. And when thinking
definitely.
about permits these days, I kind of think back, I think it's the Navy SEALs have this saying, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that to
Yeah,
me is kind of the idea behind, for a lot of investors, the reason to get permits, right? It might be a little bit slower, it might cost a little bit more, but by the time you're done it, you're going to be able to move fast because you've got the confidence, right? So if we're flipping it, you're going to be able to get top dollar because, as John mentioned, you can forward all the permits you got pulled, right? You can
definitely.
easily show all the details behind the project you undertook, where the other investor that was just trying to make a quick buck, they might end up finding themselves, holding a property that they're going to have to redo the work on, because again, the city's paying a lot more attention these days than maybe a couple decades ago as well. So they're on realtor.ca, they get neighbors sending them messages or tips and all those different things. So I think it's really important for a real estate investor just to look at the full picture. And oftentimes when we're looking at the big picture on our project, it actually, if we're going to dump serious money and serious time into it, we might as well just do it right.
100%. You brought up that checking thing. Here's a quick example. The Electrical Safety Authority now is actually looking at residential building permits for the last 5 years, cross-referencing them against electrical permits taking out, and then going after those houses that had building permits with no wiring permits. So it's like they are trying to find you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the last thing I should mention is some people ask, okay, what's the building permit process, right?
Yeah.
So as a homeowner, you can actually submit your own permits on work that you're going to do. So you want to build a deck, you can draw on a piece of paper. It does not have to be fancy, what you want to do. And the city is going to correct your mistakes. So it's not a big deal to take out that permit. A duplex conversion, for example, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hire either an architect or a BCIN. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
building code identification number. They're going to come in and take plot plans. They're going to come and take the measurements, and they're going to produce concepts. You're going to approve them. And once you're happy with them, they're going to submit to the city for permit for you, or the contractor will. And then once the city goes through the process, which is a little bit lengthy right now, don't get me wrong, it's probably going to be 6 to 8 weeks from drawings to getting permits minimum. So it's something that you want to do early. And then they'll do the permits. They're going to go through the zoning verifications and checks and all that stuff. So that's why that's a service. It's just not worth trying to do yourself. Get the professional. How much does it
Mm-hmm.
cost? The average BCN we work with costs about $4,000 to do all that work. The building permits depends on city, but let's say for a duplex conversion between 1,000 and 2,000. And if you want to add a little engineering or something, so budget between $5,000 and $8,000 for that, and it's going to make a beautiful process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that, John. You're always a wealth of information. And for anyone at home that's watching this, if you guys want to reach out to John, if you want to hire Blackjack Contracting, we've got all their information in the video description down below. So again, really encourage you guys to reach out to John. And just for anyone that's maybe new, maybe this is the first time they're watching our video, what area these days are you guys covering?
So right now we're doing from London down to Welland and a little bit east of us. We are going to expand again. I think it's been a crazy year. I've never seen so much work in my life. It's just been hard to put the resources out to expanding. So we're going to focus on that area probably until spring, and then we'll look at doing it again, going to the next area.
Awesome. Well, again, really appreciate you sharing everything with the audience, John, and looking forward to chatting on the next video.
Appreciate it, guys.